Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked? Here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Serious note today, Corona panic. I do not use that term lightly. If you would like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 712-770-9418, 712-770-9418, provided by Global Star. I'm Vincent Finelli. Jason is engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network in Minnesota, GCNlive.com. Today with us, as usual on Mondays, Dr. Norm Shealy. Welcome, Dr. Shealy.
Good morning. There's something slightly worse than coronavirus this morning here. There's a cordon around the building. It took me 40 minutes to find a place to walk over a block to get into the clinic, followed by the police. There was a shooting right across the street, 5 people dead. I'm the only one in the building at the moment.
Dr. Shealy, I've passed that come-and-go gas station many times. It had been open and closed, and it looked like it just reopened, within the last several months again. And so right across the street, there was a shooting. And
actually, it hit some of the windows in the building here where I am.
Wow.
Gunshots. However,
so
I'm here.
Did you get a police escort into your building?
I did. Well, they were actually there was 5 police cars all around the building. So the minute I opened the door, they came in and searched the building and, told me about the windows in the back part of the building that were shot. And they were nice.
So did they tell you of any motives? Is it panic to get gasoline?
Nobody knows at this point.
Okay, I'm so glad you're okay. Last night we decided that gasoline is something that we ought to top off. And, we have some gas cans, and we use gasoline for powering vehicles to work the cows and work the farm. And so we filled up some of our red gas cans last night. And I was thinking about, what is the highest and best use for gasoline in a time like this? And it's not traveling back and forth to work. I mean, people are just not going to work. Well, it's for chainsaws. If you have a chainsaw, you'll be able to find some wood and cut it up and have some heat in the winter. So that to me was critical, absolutely critical. And that's what we work. Yes.
How many houses today even have a wood-burning stove?
Well, that's a really good point, Dr. Shealy, because if you think about it, a lot of people have been conned into an all-electric house. And I guess that's one of the things that you wanted to talk about today. What do you do in a situation like that? So here's what's happened, class. People have been conned into getting, this is not an exaggeration. People have been conned into getting a television, a flat-screen TV, and putting it on the wall, on the floor, on the wall, where a fireplace would be. And then when they entertain, what they do is they turn on the TV with an image of a burning fire, kind of like when you used to watch the television at Christmas time and they would have Christmas carols playing with a fire burning on the television screen. That would be the image of just a nice glowing fire. So people have done that, bought TVs just for the purpose of having an image of a fire rather than a fireplace. Well, TV is $400, maybe $300, sometimes $200, maybe a little bit less, rather than having a real fireplace to do the job that they used to do. People didn't put fireplaces in their house in the 1800s for an image. They did it to heat the darn room or cook food.
Well, when we had the big freeze about 20 years ago and electricity was off for a week out of the farm and 2 weeks in Springfield, we took advantage of our wood fireplace insert to cook food and heat some part of the house.
Mm-hmm. We've got Joe in New York calling in. Welcome, Joe.
Vince, the reason I'm calling is that a while back you had mentioned the fact that you knew Frank Zappa, and you had experiences with him.
Well, I won't say I knew him, but I will say that he was one of my instructors at one time.
Well,
for
that's
a very short period of
absolutely
time.
Amazing.
Why do you say that?
Because I think of Frank Zappa as someone who had immense ability, and
he did.
He was very, very talented. So what was your experience with him, or what did he instruct you on?
Well, he and Captain Beefheart, which Captain Beefheart was a sidekick of his. Now we're talking back in probably, I'm thinking maybe 1972, 73, that era. He taught a class that for a short period of time, and I was fortunate to go. But Captain Beefheart was in the front of the class next to Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa did like 99.999% of the talking, and Captain Beefheart was asleep in the front of the class. He had his holding up his head, and ultimately he fell asleep. But Captain Frank Zappa, he didn't like people who. He didn't like smoking. He liked good behavior. I mean, he looked like he was pretty wild. He looked like a hippie. But he was. He had ethics, and maybe he instilled a little bit of that in me. But why are you calling about Frank Zappa? I've meant that last time I mentioned that must have been like 4 years ago.
No, it wasn't. You had mentioned it a couple of months ago, and I found that pretty intriguing. I do listen to you. I like your approach, and I like the way that you go about things. And so
you mean like
hear that, though, what?
You mean like walk softly and carry a big stick? That approach?
No, it's just it's just the way that you deal with reality. And I will say that many years ago, back in the 70s, at the Palladium in New York City, Frank Zappa, because I've seen some of his concerts, he refused to play for us because he felt the audience was just partaking in a little too much amusement on their own. And
right.
He just refused. He refused. It was on Halloween. I mean, I used to go and see, when I was a little cat, a long time ago, those were the things that we did back in the 70s. And, it was amazing that he did have a standard. And he's a very smart guy. Very smart guy.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. And maybe I took a page out of his book when I would go to the meetups, and the people in the meetup group in Springfield, Missouri on a Friday night, or well, actually it was a Monday night at that time. It started out on Fridays, but ended up on Mondays. And they refused to stop bringing their cell phones into the meetup group. And I didn't want to say things that could be picked up and recorded and so forth. So it kind of stifled the dialogue in lots of ways. And I just couldn't get people to stop bringing their cell phones in. So I stopped talking about the kind of things I would talk about because of that. And I guess you're saying Frank Zappa said, hey, y'all, if you're not paying attention and if you're not serious about this, why should he be? I think that's what you're telling me.
I think you're right. I think you picked up on that. He had definitely a way about him which was absolutely amazing. And, it was just I'm still intrigued with the fact that, you had experienced Mr. Zappa's greatness. Anyway, Vince,
up close.
Up close. You can't get, and I won't get into why they called him Captain Beefheart. I mean, that's a whole other story, but we won't do that. With that being said, though, I think you're doing a fine job, and you're very proficient at what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. And let me just say this. I am absolutely livid and frosted with broadcasters today who are not taking the corona panic seriously. We've been calling it out like it is. And people are saying, to this day, they're saying that, this is just a fraud, it's a fake, it's BS, to use their term. And Dr. Shealy and I are prepared to talk about what to do about the coronavirus and being prepared. It's a serious, serious situation. And regardless of who done it, regardless of that, regardless of why it was done, regardless of whether there are ulterior motives to take down the presidency, to take down the Democrats, to take down the Republicans, to make life miserable, to eliminate people, we should really be focused on how do we survive this thing. Then at the end of it, then we can take care of business. But we've got to get through it. Okay. Joe in New York, hey, thank you so much for calling. I believe this is the first time you've called. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. And I got to say, you know what? I don't want to keep on saying this, but you are beyond. I would put you up there. I would say you're definitely better than Bob Grant. I mean, you got more talent.
Whoa. Oh, no. Joe, I've got to weigh in. Bob Grant, whose real name was Bob Giganti, an Italian guy, I think was one of the finest broadcasters ever.
You're better. You're better.
Oh,
absolutely
man.
better. You're better. Because
wow.
he capitulated. You're not. And that's what makes you better, because of the fact that you're not capitulating. And that's what makes you so good. And you got two legs up over him, and he's not around no more. But with that being said,
I know that. I used to love listening to Bob Grant. He was on WABC, a flamethrower, 50,000 watts out of New York City. And we could pick him up. The signal would skip off the ionosphere and back down. And he was great. And he used to say, "Get off my phone." And, he did say something. He did say something that got him thrown off the air. And I'll paraphrase it. There was a person, a black woman, who got promoted, and it just frosted him. And he said, "All you have to do around here to get..." Now, this is paraphrasing, so it's not the exact verbiage, and this is a long time ago. This is 3 decades ago. I'm trying to remember this from. He said something, "All you have to do around here to get promoted is pass a gynecological and pigmentation test." Do you remember that, Joe?
No, I remember men's room attendant. or when he would do the salute, which would be Ascenda me, Duze Bromenos Facim, which was his salute to Mario Cuomo. Now we have the son, which is a loser. The guy's a loser, and he's ruining the state. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, may call him the men's room attendant. Joe,
right.
Thanks so much.
Remember Dinkins, the men's room attendant.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Class Dr. Norm Shealy's with us. NormShealy.com. 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 Sharon in Montana. Welcome. You're on with Dr. Shealy.
Good morning. It does appear we're moving into a new paradigm. So the sooner you accept your new reality, the better off you'll be. We now have had this virus show up here in Montana, and they've decided to shut the schools down for 2 weeks, which means, a lot of people will be kind of hanging out at home, I presume. My first question here real quick is, way back, quite a few years ago, you guys used to kind of tout Nixol, something like that, similar to bleach, but not so bleachy smelling. And I was wondering, would that work pretty well, like to make like a hand sanitizer, mixing some of that with water and like one of those little small spray bottles that hold maybe 4 ounces or something? Would that be a good thing to use, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I wouldn't mix it with water. You could spray it directly on your hands.
Okay, you wouldn't need to mix
it with water. It would be too weak.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it would probably be about as good as alcohol.
Yeah, I've never really been big on sanitizers. I honestly don't touch my face a whole lot. I seriously don't. I haven't for years because I didn't want to catch whatever flu virus, whatever, when kids were around and stuff like that. But I was kind of, I was thinking about that. I thought, they supposedly are selling out of all that stuff, but I have become a little more proactive after going to the grocery store. I take those little wipes and wipe my hands and then the steering wheel and stuff down just for going, you never know. My thinking is, though, that probably a lot of people are going to be encouraged to stay in their homes, and that a lot of people don't have much food at all on hand. And so I was just thinking that before you go out and just crazy shop, you might make a list of what you normally consume for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what things you really like and what things you really don't like, so you don't buy, say, a bunch of dried beans when you don't even like beans. So maybe take time to really consider what you eat before you go stocking up on stuff. We have some kind of extended family members who've now decided they ought to shop, and one of them went out and bought a bunch of stuff, which isn't bad, but I happen to know this person, and I'm thinking, you're not going to really want to consume some of that stuff you bought. So that's just sort of a heads up, and I mainly just wanted to ask you about that Nixol stuff.
Well, personally, you brought up one of the most important subjects of all. My favorite concentrate food is whey protein isolate and egg white powder, extra protein, and you can make, you can survive on protein when you can't get carbohydrate and fat.
Yeah, for people like us, we put up a big garden I can, and we raise meat and hunt meat, and so we're fine. I had to laugh about the whole toilet paper thing because we buy it by a great big case, and there's only 2 of us, therefore it lasts a really long time. So, but I was just thinking, just throwing a little heads out there, some people are looking at, man, we're going to be stuck in the house, and I would suggest that, you consider what you actually like to eat, especially if you have children. They're not going to want to radically change your diet right away. So just a heads up. Anyway, thanks for your conversation.
Sharon, before you go, we have family meetings here many times a day. We live on the farm, and we don't leave the farm very often. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we all get together. We have a traditional 1950s, 1960s family. And I suggest all of you, while you have a chance to survive this corona panic, that you try to do the same thing and don't go off in different directions. But during these family meetings, we talk about what's important, what we are doing, what we need to do, what we have done, and we prioritize, and we all pull the same way. And one of the things that I mentioned to the family was, okay, so now there is absolutely no waste of anything. And this kind of ties to your toilet paper scenario. And so if there's a little spill on the kitchen stove, for example, there's a couple choices. 1, you can leave it. 2, you can wipe it up with a paper towel and throw it away. You can wipe it up with half of a paper towel and throw it away. You could wipe it up with the absolute minimum piece of paper towel and throw it away. Or you can get the dish rag that's in the kitchen sink, rinse it off, use it to wipe up, and then rinse out the dish rag. Are you having those kinds of meetings as well?
We live a real frugal lifestyle. I don't use paper towels a lot. I use them for, sticky, greasy stuff, and I just use a wash rag and wash it,
There you go. That's the point. That is the point. So we need to get away from this disposable society and back to the way it used to be. Sharon, is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, I just wanted to ask about Nixol mainly and just comment that don't buy stuff you don't like to eat.
Class, Dr. Shealy's with us, Dr. Norman Shealy, normshealy.com. Breaking news. Trading is halted at the opening bell after the Dow plummeted 2,250 points, 9%. That wiped out all of Friday's gains. Wall Street is buckling under the corona chaos. Now, pretty soon they'll probably start calling it the corona panic, which is the term that we coined right here at USA Prepares. Best gas price in Springfield, Missouri is $1.75 per gallon, 1.75 per gallon in Springfield, Missouri. Randy, welcome. Randy is in Missouri.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Vincent. A couple observations about the State of the Union address, State of National Emergency address from Friday. And one was that once again we're told that we're going to have automatic testing now that they've released all of this money. All of a sudden they bought, I don't know, they said they were going to have these Roche testing machines. So this is going to be our third test for coronavirus that they're attempting to put out, but they have these machines all lined up, and when they release the state of emergency money, all of a sudden we have these machines. I can't imagine how expensive they're going to be, but they've got up-teen thousands of them sent out to all these health centers to do these automatic testings. Something tells me this was lined up in the pipework earlier. So we had the trouble with the first test. Then they sent out the second test, and those didn't have all the components, and now we've got a third test. But, it seems like they were setting up a precedent for an emergency so that they could buy these machines from Roche. It's just amazing. It takes us back to the Chernoff days with the scanners at the airport almost. But another observation I'd like to make is that according to the company that came out with the vaccine in Texas, GAFX, I guess that's what it is, out of Houston, they have a vaccine ready, and they're starting testing on human and animal models for this vaccine. But they released their data like in February 18th. And at the same time, we had some outfit in Israel that said they were just a couple of weeks away from having a vaccine. And I think the Gates Foundation said they were just a few weeks away from having a vaccine. Isn't it amazing that we have a vaccine for a virus in the United States in the middle of February, but we don't have a test? And at the same time, you've got South Korea, and they were doing like 10, 12, 16,000 a day tests for the virus. Something doesn't add up with all the math in that equation.
Nothing adds
very
up.
Very little add. That Dr. Shealy is absolutely correct. Nothing adds up, or very little adds up. And I know for a fact, and I cannot tell you how I know, but there are about, as of the end of last week, there were only 700 test kits available in the United States. And I'm not going to use the word rationed, but that's the only word I can think of as how they're being deployed. And for example, if a patient presented with some symptoms, they would make sure that all of those symptoms had been met prior to releasing that test for that patient. And the tests are persistent cough, labored breathing, hypoxic, turning blue, a fever of 101.4 or higher. And if the person didn't have all of those symptoms, that person would not receive the test. So 101.3 plus not being able to breathe, turning blue, that wasn't sufficient. I'm very serious. It sounds crazy, but that is how dear, that's the term that used to be used back in the Depression, how dear those tests happen to be. And the number that I believe is accurate is about 75 tests per state in our neck of the woods here in the central part of the United States. So, when President Trump said he would have 1 million tests available, I think we fell pretty short of that. It was more like 700, not 700,000, 700. Go ahead, Randy.
To give them a benefit of the doubt, I think each test kit had about 500 tests in it, but you were absolutely right about the way they were rationing these tests. So, but I would step out on a limb to bet that there's a number of congressmen that had stock in Roche pharmaceuticals that the federal government just bought all their test computer machines. So I think somebody made some money on that deal.
Randy, what you're saying is you're talking about inside information, and that has to be one of the main drivers, in my opinion, as to why someone would pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get a job that pays $400,000, or hundreds of thousands of jobs to get hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to get a job that pays less than $200,000. So it's about the inside information. That's what it is. And I mentioned the story about when I was in California and how I met Al Gore. And he was very interested in what our company was doing. And it took me up until just a few years ago, and this was in 1980, exactly 1980, when I met Al Gore in Washington, D.C. He came up to our booth when we were exhibiting satellite communications hardware in Washington, D.C. at the largest satellite communications convention there was. There were just three of us. And by the way, all three of us are USA Prepares instructors. And we were there, and Al Gore was very interested in our technology. And I couldn't figure out why he was so interested, some government type, being interested in satellite communications. And I think the reason was, and by the way, he wanted to start an organization, a brand new organization. He was going to get started called SPACE, Society for Private and Commercial Earth Stations. And SPACE was going to be a lobby organization to help the industry. And the industry was just a fledgling industry. And I couldn't figure out why he would do it, because I was pretty naive back then. I probably still am. But the idea, it just occurred to me a couple of years ago that what he was doing is he would call us up if we had joined. We did not join. But if we had, he would probably call us up, and this is all hypothesis, and say, hey, so what's new? What y'all doing? We'd be all excited about telling, Al Gore the inside scoop. And then he would probably use that to make money, as we went further down the securities market. Interesting. That's the story. Okay, Dr. Shealy, New York City public schools are closed through at least April 20th. And the story goes up and down and across the United States. Schools are being closed. Restaurants are being closed. Limits are being demanded that restaurants don't fill up more than 50%. Restaurants in some locations or bars are being closed at 10 o'clock. So there are restrictions. And will there be travel restrictions? Well, we don't have it yet, but it sure seems like it's coming. Your thoughts?
Oh, I think, everything is possible. Pandora's box has been bombed open.
Yep. And you wanted to talk about, I believe you wanted to talk about some questions for me. Is that right?
Well, yeah. I think the time has passed, but people who haven't yet done it need to get prepared as rapidly as they can in case there is a total lockdown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of those questions is just what does being prepared mean, right?
Exactly. And how comprehensive do you want to be? And what is the difference for people who live rurally in small villages or in apartment houses versus independent houses? All of these things are critically different.
Dr. Shealy and I have been broadcasting the longest of any two instructors at USA Prepares. Dr. Shealy was very, very early in the game with me. And so for about going on 9 years now, we have been talking about being prepared. And the things that we would say today about the coronavirus are nothing different. Nothing new here about being prepared. And being prepared is simply this. It's having the knowledge and the materials before you need them, like the owner's manuals, the repair manuals, the spare parts, and the tools necessary to do the job, the food, the water, the clothing that are necessary that you need before you need them, before you realize you need them. Bright people don't go hiking without food and water, and and appropriate footwear and clothing. Bright people check the weather reports. We check the weather reports before we leave, the farmhouse. We check, if we were in the past, if we were going to the big city, which is maybe an hour away, we check the weather report. Do we need coats, jackets, rain gear? Is it going to snow? If it is, we're not going. Things like that. Why extend the risk beyond reason? Why do that? Just because we're bored? We don't get bored. Living on a farm, it's impossible to be bored. Now, it's possible to say I don't feel like doing it, but it's impossible to be bored. And, we communicate. When we leave the farm, we communicate our planned routes for the day and the alternative routes should the first choice not be available. What I'm saying by that is if we are going to the big city and we're going to take Route 1, and we say to the whole family, okay, there's 2 of us going, there's 2 of us staying, and we want to make sure that someone's going to be around to answer the phone at the farm should we have a problem, and we plan on taking Route 1. We're going to stop off at point A, then go to point B, then by 3 o'clock we should be at C, and 4 o'clock we'll be at D, and then we're going to leave back for home from point D. And that's our first choice. If anything happens and you don't hear from us for the expected time, you can start worrying. If you don't hear from us by this time, maybe you might want to consider making some phone calls or come along the route that we had planned to go. Now, if Route 1 is closed, we're going to be using Route 2. And that's how we do it, Dr. Shealy. We communicate with the family how we're going to get there, when we're going to be where, and how we're going to get back, and when we'll be back. And we don't need a cell phone to do that. Now, cell phone might be nice, but I don't want to carry one with me. So that's how we do it. Any comments about that, Dr. Shealy?
Well, that is something. But, ever since we started meeting together, I've always thought about, a lot of this sounds like what I was taught at 12 years of age as a Boy Scout. Once upon a time, they prepared people to be alert.
That's exactly right. And that's where a lot of this came from. I mean, the Boy Scout motto is be prepared. That's what they taught. But now the Boy Scouts is on the verge of bankruptcy, if they have not already declared bankruptcy. And how is it possible that a message so simple as being kind and truthful and nice and helpful and clean and courteous and reverent, how is it possible that a message like that and being prepared has been stomped out? How's it possible? When we come back, we'll talk about being prepared. To Norm Shealy, normshealy.com, normshealy.com. And I went into the kitchen and topped off the coffee, and my family said, so you all know about Dr. Shealy's, across the street and the shooting and 5 dead. And I said, yeah, not only that, but bullets were flying and some windows were broken at Dr. Shealy's office. Dr. Shealy, isn't it possible that had someone been in your office that one of those stray projectiles could have killed somebody in your office?
Oh, of course. Apparently this seems to have taken place during the evening when the building was empty, but, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm mentioning this class is I think as we descend into a more chaotic situation, there'll be more bullets flying. Why am I saying this? Well, after months of silence, I woke up during the weekend to gunshots. And these were deliberate shots from, I guess, close to about a mile away, maybe a little farther. And it was deliberate, one shot, and then, a couple minutes later, another shot. And these are single shots, not automatic gunfire, but single shots. High-powered rifles sounded like to me. And then another shot, and this went on for hours. And it sure sounded like someone was sighting in rifles for long-distance shooting. That's what it sounded like to me. So I'm telling you that I'm hearing more gunshots, and I think we're going to hear more gunshots as this corona panic continues. And I don't use the term corona panic lightly, because the supply chain, as it breaks, people are going to lose their cool. They're going to become discourteous, even more discourteous than they already have been. And the fights have already broken out in stores, fights over paper towels and toilet paper. I'm sure you've read about that. And had you been prepared, had you been proactive, you would not be in those environments. And I'm sure that many of you have avoided being in the environments of, being in the stores with these people who have been exposed to sick people and exposed, you or those to the coronavirus. And there are people who are saying that, it's a ruse, it's a hoax, it's a fraud, and it's designed to kill us and cause us to run for the vaccines that may kill us as well. So the answer is it could be all of those things. Or it could just be that it's just a man-made flu that's designed to kill people and limit the population. Are people profiting? Absolutely, people are profiting. There are greedy people everywhere. But I'd like to read something that I did a little bit of research. There was a headline. I'm going to read the headline, and then I'm going to read a little bit of information I got from Wikipedia about this individual. And this is the headline, quote, U.S. is not headed for a recession, says Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, makes extraordinary claim in the middle of the coronavirus crisis after the worst week on Wall Street since the Great Recession. But he admits a slowdown is inevitable. That's the quote. Now, I just want to read the first part of it one more time. U.S. is not headed for a recession, says Steve Mnuchin. All right. Now, so who is this guy? Well, Stephen Turner Mnuchin, I'm sorry, let me spell this. It's hard to spell. It's hard to pronounce. Mnuchin. Mnuchin. Stephen Turner Mnuchin is an American investment banker and a civil servant who is serving as the 77th United States Secretary of the Treasury as part of the cabinet of President Donald Trump. Previously, Mnuchin had been a hedge fund manager and investor. Stephen Mnuchin was born in 1962 in New York City, the second youngest son in his family. Mnuchin's family is Jewish. He is the son of Robert E. Mnuchin of Washington, Connecticut, and Elaine Turner Cooper of New York. Stephen Mnuchin is an American film producer and a political and American banker who was born in 1962. He belongs to the Republican Party and the Republican Party and the partner of the Goldman Sachs Company for 17 years. He's a multi-talented personality and has also founded the Rat Pack Dune Entertainment. So that's who this guy is. Now, I didn't embellish that. That's who he is. So here's a guy who's saying that we're not headed for a recession. I got to tell you, I'm not in the government, and we are in the second Great Depression. That's how I see it. As a trained guy who spent 6 years studying finance and economics at the university level in the United States. Dr. Shealy and I will be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. We're talking about the corona panic. And I read an article. I can't find it now. I was going to quote some of it. I don't like reading articles and verbatim. I just like to give you the gist of it, and my take on it, and discuss it with Dr. Shealy, for example. But I understand that the Queen has been moved out of Buckingham Palace. There are too many people there, too many workers, too many people in the government there, and so they moved her out for her own safety. That's one thing. Dr. Shealy, have you learned that too?
Yeah, I heard a bit about that and the big Parliament debate going on right now about their health care system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the White House, our White House, is, I won't use the word lockdown, but I would say very restricted access. So you're not going to get into the White House. Yeah. You're not getting into the White House as you used to be able to. And I'm not talking about, we can't get in anyway. I mean, the general population, we're not getting into the White House. But those who would normally get into the White House, they're being checked, their temperature's being checked. And I'm certain that there's way more restriction to the access of the White House than there used to be. And there is rumors, and I'm pretty darn sure these are right, that military bases are starting to look very carefully at who goes in and who goes out, meaning like contractors who do things for the military. They may not have the access that they used to have. That hasn't made the news yet, but I have a feeling it will very, very shortly. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the people who are outside contractors who do things. They may have offices in the military base. They may be technicians who repair equipment for the military that the military doesn't have expertise in, like water purification systems and things like that. So those people may even have a very difficult time getting into these installations in the United States. This is not a fabrication. This is a real situation. People are dying all over the world. So for those who think that this is not real, American Airlines would not shut down 75% of its flights for something that's not real. Schools across the entire United States closing, they wouldn't do that if it's not real. There would not be a report of the two emergency doctors, a medic in his 40 in Washington and a 70-year-old New Jersey physician, are in critical condition after being infected with the coronavirus. How about that? So here we have medical personnel who are in critical condition as a result. Now, they've been treating people, and they got it. So, Dr. Shealy, that's something that, we talked about over the last few weeks. Boy, I got to tell you, I'm not going to town, and I would really like to suggest that you treat via Skype or some other method, phone call or something, rather than see patients.
Well, today and tomorrow maybe, but at least it looks as if we will be cordoned off all of today, if not even tomorrow. So I have no choice right now because of the shooting across the street. But let's talk about the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people have stored food. They may have a week's supply, a week or two of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I have enough food to last a year, but most of it's frozen. Should I go ahead and can it in a like my usual glass jar canning?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you what my thoughts are. So electricity is the big nut to crack, okay? Because our entire world runs on electricity. So from the moment our alarm clock wakes us up, it continues to be used by us until the TV puts us to sleep at night. It makes our coffee, it microwaves our breakfast, burrito, it powers our phone to make lunch appointments and text our friends and family while we're supposed to be working. Without electricity, we will not be able to function as a society. The cash registers at the store won't function. The clerks won't even know what the prices of the cans of beans on the shelf are. So they can't even make change without electricity. The reason I said that way is it's my opinion that without electricity, the absence of electricity will move us back to at least the 1700s. At least the 1700s. Because we don't have the tools now to make horse-drawn wagon parts without electricity. Our saws are powered by electricity. Our measurements are powered by electricity. We don't know how to use rulers and gauges and things like that aren't digital.
And we don't have kerosene lamps.
That's right. And where was the last time you saw kerosene available at, let's say, a gas station for sale? Right? So we don't have that. So Dr. Shealy, we won't even be able to make the grease to grease the wheels on a wagon. We don't have that ability. We don't even know what to do. We wouldn't know how to use, animal fat as a lubricant. In my opinion, almost everyone will die without refrigeration, without electricity. There'll be no lettuce from California, avocados from Mexico. There'll be no oranges from Florida. Everything will become local. People will not even be able to inflate the tires on their car, assuming the car ran, with a hand pump. They won't be able to do it. They don't know how to use a hand pump. They don't have the strength to use a hand pump. But back in the 1940s and 50s, people resorted to using a hand pump to inflate their tires because they didn't have compressors that ran on electricity. We use vacuum cleaners to clean our rugs. Before that, the rugs used to be taken outside, and there was a rug beater that was used to beat the dust out of a rug. Right? Who even knows what a rug beater is today, right? So what I'm saying is we are so dependent on electricity, it's a problem. So in your situation, what do you do with the items in the freezer? Well, with a little bit of planning, you'd have a generator, and I know you do. And with a little bit of planning, you have some fuel, which I know you do. And with a little bit of planning, you have, the oil to change the lubricating oil of the diesel engine. And you can clean out the air cleaner. So what do you do in a situation like that? Here's what I would suggest. I would suggest if the grid goes down and you do not have solar power, then you fire up that generator and you run that freezer for a couple hours until the compressor shuts off. And while that diesel generator is running, you do all the other things like pump your water, store it in containers, run the refrigerator, do all those things simultaneously if your generator will provide that much current. Then you shut the generator off. And then in maybe 3 or 4 hours later, you do the same thing. But you try to keep what's cold. And one way of doing that is to pack that freezer with more things that can be frozen. For example, if you have milk jugs that you've washed out previously, or distilled water jugs that maybe you bought some distilled water for your farm, for your batteries, for your maintenance needs, and for emergency purposes. If you have empty jugs like that, you can fill them 90% full of water, put them in the freezer, run the freezer, get them frozen. So that frozen water will then help keep cold everything else that's in the freezer. You can use 2-liter soda bottles for that. You squeeze them down so that it's only got 90% water, because when water gets frozen, it expands. And if you squeeze down to 90% of the volume of that 2-liter bottle or that milk jug or a distilled water jug, when it freezes and expands, it won't break the container. So you try to fill up as much of that freezer as you can, or refrigerator, with the items that can stay cold. That's the way to do it. But you still are going to have to run some kind of a generator. Other than that, it's can, dehydrate, freeze dry, salt, salt the meats. Those are the options. And it's such a big problem, Dr. Shealy. There was a television show, a series called Jericho. It's about this Kansas town that there was some nuclear detonations went off and everything stopped. No more food, no more electricity, no more anything. And they had a problem because the ice cream was melting at the local supermarket, the small independent supermarket in town. And so what they do, they had a party and they ate it. It was either throw it away or eat it. So because they couldn't solve that problem either. It's a huge problem. But if you want to cure meat, you have to have the curing salt. You have to know how to do it. And if the internet is down because the grid is down, do you know how to do it, or was that information on the internet that you were going to use to preserve your meats? That's why you need books, class. That's why the internet it's a great thing while it's working. But when the grid goes down, it's not going to be working so well. That's how I see it. It's supposed to be fault tolerant, but it's not fault tolerant for a grid down scenario. Do you think that every local central office, that's the term for the telephone buildings in your area, they're like these brick buildings or block buildings, they have the telephone equipment, they're called central offices. So we think of a central office like lots of people there. No, it's just equipment. And do you think that, it's battery backed up, that's fine, and that'll last for a couple hours, but then the generators kick on. Now, how much fuel do you think they have for the generators? A couple of years' worth? No, it's more like maybe a week's worth at the most. So the internet's going to go down too. So now what do we do? So you can't, in my opinion, I won't say you can't. In my opinion, you should not depend on the grid. You should not depend on the system. You should not depend on the supply chain. Heck, that's why there's a panic for toilet paper, because people realize that the system, the warehouse for the toilet paper is on the truck from the factory. That's where the warehouse is. It's en route to the stores. And when the factory shuts down, there'll be no toilet paper in the trucks on the way to the store. And same thing is happening with baked beans. Same thing is happening with instant potatoes. Same thing is happening with paper towels. Same thing is happening with dried soup mix. It's a huge problem. And preparedness is having what you need before you need it. So it's really hard to be prepared or to prepare after the event. So, and that's what people are figuring out right now. They're saying, you know what? That's not fair. They don't have toilet paper. That's not fair. I wanted to buy toilet paper, and they don't have any.
Fairness is not part of this kind of situation.
Yeah, so it's back to, one of the first things we were talking about. Preparedness is simply having the knowledge and the materials before you need them. The owner's manuals, the spare parts, the tools that you need. That's what preparedness is, and that's the lifestyle that we live. In class, if you were watching TV or your neighbors were watching TV while you were preparing, they're probably going to knock on your door and say, "Yo, hey, listen, got any milk? Got any bread? Can I have half a roll of toilet paper, please?" So, Dr. Shealy, to answer your question a little more completely, there's another alternative. Generator is certainly one, and an inverter is another way. Now, this is a temporary solution to a big problem. So, for example, I have something called a kilowatt meter, KILL-A-watt, kill-a-watt meter. And it tells me how much electricity certain devices use. So I tested out. I don't believe anything I read. I hardly believe anything I even see. I want to test it for myself. So I tested how much electricity a stand-up 21 cubic foot frost, no automatic defrost freezer takes. So it's just a manual defrost freezer, 21 cubic feet. Takes about 250 watts to run it. But it takes about 3 times that to start it. So in order to start that, you'd need an inverter of at least 750 watts. More like 1,000 would be the minimum to run a upright manual defrost freezer. It would take probably maybe 1.5 times that to run an automatic defrost freezer. Okay. It takes about, for a chest freezer, let's say about an 18 cubic foot model, it takes about 200 watts. And so that's just to give you a rough feel. And it takes 3 times the starting current as it takes the running current. So that 150 watt chest freezer, 18 cubic feet, this is an older model now, it would take 450 watts to start that. So what you can do is you can get what's called an inverter. And it's a box, kind of like a shoebox in size. And it has two cables, and you can clamp that to your automotive battery. So if you have a car or a light truck, you can just hook it up as you would jumper cables. And this box, this inverter box, has electrical receptacles. And you can plug in an extension cord and run that extension cord out to your freezer. And that'll work fine, but it will drain your vehicle's battery. So what you'd have to do is time starting the engine of your vehicle to charge the battery while the inverter is running so that you could keep the freezer running. Now, on average, the average fuel tank is probably half full because at the maximum it's full, at the minimum it's empty, so on average it's half full. So if you keep that tank full, you'll have some time where you can run your engine and charge the battery, which will provide current to the inverter, which will run the freezer. That's a great way to go, and you can do that for $200 or less. I would suggest getting an inverter of 2,000 watts or maybe a little bit more. And that's a great way to go in an emergency situation because your vehicle's kind of quiet. It's not like running a generator that's really loud and lets all the neighbors know that you've got electricity and fuel. And a generator burns an enormous amount of fuel. For example, it's kind of interesting how this works. So we talk about horsepower. Well, a horsepower is equal to 746 watts. So if you have a 1 horsepower generator, which I don't know of one, but if there were no friction and no losses, you'd be able to generate 746 watts. But there's friction and losses. So if you have a 10 horsepower generator, you might generate at peak 8,000 watts. But a 10 horsepower engine is going to burn about a gallon of fuel, gasoline, per hour. So you would use up that 5-gallon red jug of gasoline in 5 hours. Now, who has, enough to last a few days? Hardly anybody, right? So it's a huge problem. Now, I've been to expos, and they've shown people riding a stationary bicycle that has a little alternator on it. Let's talk about that for just a second. Yeah. Well, a strong man, and I'm just going to say man for now. It could be a woman, but a strong man is capable of producing about 1/10 of 1 horsepower, for a while, maybe an hour or two. Okay. But a strong man is only capable of producing 1 horsepower for a few seconds. So if you wanted to generate enough electricity to make a slice of toast, 1 man can't do it. It takes 3 or 4 men working as hard as they could to generate electricity to make 1 slice of toast. Class, Dr. Shealy's with us, and we've been talking about generators. We've been talking about inverters. The bottom line is to be prepared means having it before you need it. So if you don't have it already, it's tough. It's really tough. But yes, you can still buy on the internet inverters. Do your own research. And let me give you just a thumbnail guide as to a way to do this. You need something called a kilowatt. That's the best way. You don't have to have a kilowatt, but it surely makes it a lot easier to figure out how many watts an appliance uses. The heavier the cord, the more current that device uses, the harder it is to keep that running. A toaster, forget it. It's not practical. I just said that it would take 3 to 4 guys pedaling a bicycle, with a generator to make a piece of toast, and I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. That's true. So if you look at the bottom of your coffee maker, you'll see that it draws about 1,000 watts or more. That's an enormous amount of consumption. So what you need to do is shift those electrical devices to an alternative fuel that you can store easily and inexpensively. So what is the best type of cooking to have? Well, if you're in the city, I guess that would be natural gas. If you're in the country, that would be propane, because it's almost impossible to have a generator large enough to run an electric oven or the electric cooktop with resistive elements. It's almost impossible. Actually, practically it's impossible, because you would need a huge generator. And when you're not cooking, you'd be running that huge generator and burning that extra fuel that you don't need to burn. So what do you do? Well, what we did many years ago, decades ago, we bought a used house, and it had an electric cooktop. It was great, except that if the power failed, which was like a regular occurrence, the stove didn't work, the cooktop didn't work. So what we did was we got rid of that and bought a propane / natural gas cooktop. And for maybe $200, we were in business, except for the plumbing, And then we put in a 500-gallon propane tank, and when the electricity was out, we could cook. It was a great way to go. And so we never had to worry about that. But the real question is, do you really have to cook? Actually, you don't in many circumstances. I mean, if you want spaghetti, yeah, I guess you do. But if you have a can of beans in an emergency, you don't have to cook them. Just open the can. Make sure you have a manual can opener, because an electric one won't work during a grid down situation. Dr. Shealy, any comments?
Well, all of the above. And I just thought of one other thing. in a short-term emergency, you might even use coke if you got a coke grill, for instance.
Yeah, what you're talking about is coal, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it takes a while to start it. And you can have some briquettes. Absolutely. You could have one of those gas grills, and you can have an extra container of propane, but it won't last forever. I mean, those are small tanks of propane, but you can get a larger one. The real hot setup is simple. You buy a farm, and you get your own propane tank, and you fill it up, and you own it. And you plumb that into your propane stove. So now you have a stove and a cooktop that you can heat with your fuel that you own, and you're not dependent on somebody else owning the tank, and you're not dependent on, the natural gas pipeline that comes from, the city utilities, for example. So survivalism is having your own rather than being on the supply chain. And I don't want to be on the supply chain. So the electricity is a real big problem. And that's why you might want to consider moving out to the country and building your own solar array. But don't get one that is grid tied. Because if the grid goes down, you've got nothing. Literally. When Dr. Shealy brought this up months ago, that if you have a grid tied system, you've got your own solar array, you've got an inverter, and it dumps your electricity onto the grid. But when the grid goes down, the clock that runs that 60 cycle per second frequency goes down with the grid, and now your system is worthless. And you have no electricity, even though you have solar panels. Now, you could convert it if you had an inverter, and if you had some batteries. Then you could charge the batteries and use the inverter. I mean, you could do that. But you have to know how to do it. And I met this gal in the supermarket, and that's what she did. She sold those grid-tied systems. And I asked her what kind of batteries she recommended. She was clueless about batteries. She had no idea. And she's a professional in the industry. So that's another thing. You can't, let me say it this way. I would not trust the opinion of a professional without doing my own research. Because they don't generally know. And I just gave you a perfect example. There's a gal in the solar industry selling solar systems to businesses and individuals about how to have their own solar system on their roof. What a great idea. And then the customers had no clue that when the power went down, they had no electricity. How is that possible that they didn't know? Well, because they relied on the salesmanship and the expertise, alleged expertise of other people. Don't do that. Make sure you do your own research. Dr. Shealy, do you want to talk about communications?
Well, that's another one. I don't think we're going to use smoke, set up smoke sound screens, whatever,
Smoke signals, yeah. Okay, well, here's what happens. Now, when I broadcast, and when Dr. Shealy, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Shealy, but you do up-to-the-minute research for the news and also medical issues and updates and statistics and things like that on the Internet. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, because if you were to listen to the radio, you'd be listening a long time to find out what you really want to know, because you'd be dependent on someone else thinking about what you want to know before or in order to prepare for that broadcast. Well, what I do for the broadcast is I'll get on the Internet and I'll do all kinds of reading. And I'll read books. But if the Internet goes down, I'm not going to be able to tell you in a broadcast what just happened. Because the Internet went down. That is the main driver of the main transport for information right now. So I read about it and I talk about it. I read about it and I talk about, I add my expertise in the area that I might have a little bit of knowledge to what I just read, or my experiences to what I just read, which is what we're doing right now. But if the Internet goes down, that's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to talk about the news. It'll be difficult to talk about anything that's beyond local. Now, I can talk about, what happened in our little village and who's having coffee with who. I can talk about that. But that's not really important. And what that really means is if the Internet goes down, information will cease to exist in the way we know it. And all information will become local. What's local? Well, it depends on, it can be person-to-person communications. And in the corona panic, I don't want to talk to anybody, person-to-person. I want to be at distance from them. So it's not likely that I'll be talking, in person with anybody. So, or very few people, I guess. So what do? Well, you can have two-way radios. And the least expensive two-way radio, and we've talked about this last week, is made by a company called Bofang. And a Bofang radio is, let me see if I can find one. Okay, so it's spelled B-A-O-F-E-N-G, B-A-O-F-E-N-G. And the best bang for the buck is a Bofang radio with the model number UV as in ultraviolet, UV-5, and the letter R, UV5-5R. They are a ham radio. They're programmable. They're difficult to program. You don't get many instructions with them. They're made in China, and they cost $23.80 each. You can buy them on Amazon right now. They're still available. And you can power that up, and you can listen. And you can listen to what's happening in your area. You can listen farther than you can transmit with those radios. So you can probably get several miles out, maybe, with line of sight, very few trees, a few miles. Or you can buy two of them for $39.99. That way, if you have a farm or you want to talk to someone in your family or friends, you can each have one and pick a frequency and use it. So for $20 a piece, you can have two radios. What a great way to go. And they have a rechargeable battery pack with them. We have them, and we like them, but they won't last forever. They're kind of cheesy, but they work. So that's the Bofang UV5R. That will help you get local communications. If you want to go a little farther, you might want to get a Citizens Band radio. And you can buy them at pawn shops. You can buy them used and figure on spending around $100 for one and get an antenna or make an antenna and research how to make your own antenna out of a piece of wire. And you can do that. And you can listen to the truckers going by. Now, the truckers have them. And it used to be more popular than it is right now, but they still have them. And you will hear truckers going by. So let's say you live in Springfield, Missouri, or near any other city, and you live near, within a few miles of a highway. You'll hear the truckers talking to each other, saying what happened in San Antonio, or Dallas, or Fort Worth, or San Francisco, because they just came back from there. And that's a great way to go as well. But that's pretty much, and also AM and FM radio. Other than that, I think the way of communicating and receiving information is going to be tough. And those are the choice. Oh, of course, ham radio. So you can buy a ham radio. I've got a rig, and, I can listen worldwide. And a ham radio, if you get a high-frequency model, an older type from maybe 30 years ago, then it'll cost you about $400 or $500. One of those will help you get shortwave. It will get shortwave. Or you can buy a shortwave radio. And that's how we used to get the news. But shortwave radio, those transmitters take a couple 100,000 watts. So they've got to have electricity to transmit, or they're not going on the air either. Bottom line is when the internet goes down, you're not going to hear much news because all the talking heads, that's where they get the news from, the internet. So if that's down, they're not going to have much to say. Dr. Shealy, your thoughts?
Well, the question is, hunker down before you have to hunker down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, people thought we were kind of crazy. We've been in lockdown for almost 2 weeks. Lockdown for 2 weeks. So that's because we don't want people showing up here because we don't know where they've been. Sometimes we don't even know who they are. Sometimes people just show up. Let's say there's a delivery driver and he shows up, but he's looking for someplace else. He just thought he'd ask us. We don't want them here. It's going to be less friendly. It really is going to be less friendly. And in New York City, let's see. Here's an interesting story. UN diplomats claim that New York City officials told them that the coronavirus has spread throughout the city, and everyone should assume they've been exposed, with the threat lasting until fall. Let me say that again, in case you missed it. UN diplomats claim that New York City officials told them coronavirus has spread throughout the city, and everyone should assume they've been exposed. Everyone should assume they've been exposed. Where have you heard that before? So you may think it's only 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 cases. In New York City, the officials told UN diplomats that they should assume they have been exposed, that everyone has been exposed. That's how serious this is. And if you get sick, are you going to bring it home to your parents who are older than you are and get them killed? So please pay attention and don't believe the people who are saying that it's just a fraud. We'll be right back. Dr. Shealy's with us, normshealy.com, NORMSHEALY.com. Class, if you want to get your vitamin C and your vitamins and supplements, you can go to normshealy.com. Dr. Shealy, I was at Walmart's and Amazon's website, and I was looking for dried soup mix. And I'd put it in my cart, and I'd click checkout, and it'd be gone. And it wasn't, I've heard this from other people. So, you'd have it in your cart, and someone would take it out of your cart while you were buying it. That's the kind of stuff that's happening online. I'm very serious. And Lipton chicken noodle soup.
The situation is already in total chaos, let's face it.
Absolutely. And literally, go ahead.
I do want to mention one of my favorites. We've talked about this in the past, is getting your antioxidants, which is the most crucial thing that you get from your veggies and fruits. And there is something called ORAC, O-R-A-C, rich greens. It's also a Patriot Power greens. Both of these are powdered, dried things that give you, the ORAC rich, you get 10,000. That is equivalent to 10 big servings of fruits and vegetables in one scoop. And it would be really worth considering having a couple of cans of that stuff on hand.
Okay, and where do we get that, Dr. Shealy?
Well, it's on our website, ORAC Rich Greens. I don't have the Patriot Power, but ORAC Rich Greens I've been using for a couple of months. And it just is an additive. You can't get, I think, too many antioxidants.
Okay, class, that's at normshealy.com, NORMSHEALY.com. So I want to look at how much is Lipton chicken noodle soup. Now, it comes in a little box, and you get 2 pouches in each box. So you can buy 2 boxes with 2 pouches each, so that'd be 4 little pouches. Now, it used to be like less than $2 each. On the Internet, $23.25 for 1 box right now. I'm not kidding. So there's price gouging going on. 6 cans of Progresso soup Sunday morning. Now, $83.46 for 6 cans of soup. That's $13.91 a can. They used to be available at $1.50 a can. Manischewitz split pea soup. It comes in a tube, like a plastic tube, and you can see the peas and the seasoning and all that in there. Used to be about $1.41. Now a 24-pack is available on Amazon for $61.82. What I'm saying is there's a lot of price gouging that's going on right now, and it's offensive. It's offensive. So if you're being gouged, remember who's gouging you. And if you have to buy it to survive, that's one thing. But remember and never patronize them when things settle back down. That's how I look at it. This is an awful time that we're living in. Some of the best in humanity is coming out. Not so much, though. And some of the worst is coming out more. I mean, really fighting over toilet paper, really stealing toilet paper out of a cart, and someone at the supermarket, when someone's head's turned, taking the things right out of their cart when they've already got them. I mean, the protocols are being violated. Civility is being violated. And that's why we've been saying for a long time, get out of Dodge. Get away from that. Really get away from it if you can. Dr. Shealy, you want to talk about soap as well? Was that one of the items that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, of course. I've always had a lot of soap on hand. I have the bottles, soap to refill the little things, hand dispensers, and I I always have on hand 3 or 4 months of dishwashing detergent and that kind of thing. I think that's one thing you want to be sure to have lots of soap.
Right, and don't waste any of it. Yeah, and don't waste any. So here's what you can do, class. If you have a shower, you need a shower rack. Okay, you don't put the soap in that shower wall because it's always filled with water, and the soap gets consumed, it gets diluted, it gets dissolved by the water that sits on those built-in shower panels in the typical shower. So what you do is you buy a shower rack. It's one of these things that hangs from the shower head pipe. And you can put your soap back there, and it dries out. And a bar of soap will last 3, 4, 5x what it would last if you did not have a shower rack. I'm not kidding. So you can probably get a month out of each bar of soap, literally. So if you go to the dollar store, you can buy Dial soap if that's okay with you, and the antibacterial if that's okay with you. It comes in 3.2 and 4 ounce sizes, and they intermix them, so it's really hard to figure out what you're buying. So buy the 4 ounce size because it's more bang for your buck, and you can get 10 of them for $4.95 right now while they still have it, and you can buy a bunch of it and store it in a 5-gallon bucket and keep the lid on it, and it'll last years. I don't know what the life expectancy is, but I can tell you it lasts at least 20 years, at least. Dr. Shealy, thank you so much for being with us today through these rough times. And class, if you'd like to call Dr. Shealy, you can find his phone number on the internet. Just look up Norm Shealy, Normshealy.